The other big boy arriving this update was the T-90A, a vehicle that has been widely requested for several years. But is this tank actually any good in War Thunder? The story of the T-90A is rather a grim one. It was designed and made not out of a combat requirement, but rather a financial one. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, a poor economy forced the Soviet army to standardise all new tank production, and in many ways, these new tanks were less capable than the older T-80s. Regardless of being a weaker vehicle than the T-80U already in game, the T-90A has been massively hyped by the War Thunder community. But is this old Soviet slugger actually worth grinding? Stick around and find out. Alright lads, today I'm going to be talking about the performance, weapons and playstyle of the T-90A. Starting as always with the basics, this vehicle is a rank 7 battle rating 10.7 main battle tank located in the Soviet tech tree. Being a rank 7 tech tree vehicle, it will come stock and will only be effective at researching other vehicles between the ranks of 6 and 7. To unlock this tank, you'll have to grind out 400,000 research points before purchasing the tank for a cost of 1,030,000 silver lions. You will then have to crew the vehicle for the cost of an additional 300,000 silver lions. To purchase the expert and ace qualifications for the tank, it will cost you 1,030,000 silver lions and 2,100 golden eagles respectively. By top tier standards, the T-90A actually has a low repair cost of 5,400 silver lions, but as with all the other vehicles added this patch, this repair cost is almost certainly going to increase in the coming months. Going on to the rewards, and the vehicle has a base RP modifier of 2.38, which gives you an RP modifier of 238% with a free-to-play account and 476% with a premium account. Your base silver line modifier of 1.5 is pretty good, and you can expect a 150% silver line modifier with a free-to-play account and 225% with a premium account. When it comes to customization, we have several camouflages available to purchase, including woodland, desert and winter camouflage schemes. As with all other late Soviet vehicles, my personal favourite is the late green. Starting with the engine and mobility, and the tank is powered by an engine producing 1000 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's weight of 46.5 tonnes, it gives the tank a power to weight ratio of 21.5 horsepower per tonne. This is pretty awful for top tier, with several other Soviet main battle tanks having more power, never mind the NATO MBTs. For example, the vehicle before the T-90A, the T-72B3 has a power to weight ratio of 24, and the T-80U has a power to weight ratio of 27. This makes you far less mobile than the earlier rank 7 main battle tanks. Moving on to the transmission, and the tank can reach a top speed of 60 km per hour, which is quite good, but it's the tank's reverse speed of 4 km per hour that really lets this tank down. Just like the other T-72 derivatives, this poor reverse speed severely limits the tactical usability of this tank. You are unable to push a ridgeline or corner and quickly retreat, making it borderline suicidal to engage multiple enemies at once. Being based on the early T-72s, the T-90 is unable to neutral steer, combined with a fairly low power to weight ratio, and this does leave the tank feeling a little bit sluggish when compared to the T-80U. Overall, the mobility of the T-90A is acceptable, but not good enough to serve a tactical purpose. You can get around the battlefield, but you don't have the speed to rush early game positions or quickly dart in and out of cover, and the reverse speed of this tank gives me a horrific flashback to grinding out the British tech tree. Moving on to the armour and survivability, and the first thing to mention is that this tank only has a crew of 3 men, with 1 in the hull and 2 in the turret. This gives you pretty poor survivability if the round actually penetrates your armour, especially if the round was fired into the side of the T-90. Not only are the 2 crew members in the turret lined up, you also have a huge autoloader which will detonate if a round hits it. Just like all other Soviet main battle tanks, the frontal hull and turret of the T-90 is protected by several layers of composite armour, as well as Contact 5 explosive reactive armour. The Contact 5 blocks cover a substantial portion of both the hull and turret, and provide 120mm of armour protection against kinetic energy penetrators, as well as 450mm of protection against chemical energy. These blocks, in combination with the composite armour, give you pretty good frontal protection against both heat effects and dart rounds. It is worth mentioning, however, that the earlier T-72B3 has a more advanced relic TRA, technically meaning that this tank has lower survivability. The T-90A also has the Stura passive protection system. This defeats early SAKO missiles if you aim your turret towards a vehicle firing said missile at you. While good on paper, in-game, ironically no main battle tanks fire SAKO missiles apart from the Soviets. This passive protection system is essentially a meme, and you'll completely forget you have it in-game. Moving on to the armour protection itself, and to test this, we'll be using the new DM53 round found on the Leopard 2A6. Starting as always with the lower frontal plate, and as you can see, we have around 200mm of effective protection. If we move upwards towards the upper frontal plate, our armour protection increases, up to around 600mm of armour. While this is great against most dart rounds, the DM53 is able to punch right through it at close range. Note that the driver's hatch is even weaker, only providing around 150mm of armour. If we move up to the turret, our cheeks are pretty thick, providing around 700mm of thickness. However, if we move to the flatter front of the turret, armour protection drops significantly and is easily penetrable by the new DM53 shell. Moving to the side of the tank, and we have around 90mm of armour on the side of the hull, and if we move up to the turret, the armour protection is very good, at over 800mm, but as we move down the turret, it drops significantly downwards to around just 90mm. And finally, both the rear of the hull and turret provide just 50mm of armour. Overall, just like the mobility, the armour protection is actually worse than the earlier Rank 7 Soviet tanks, making this tank slower and less survivable than the T-80U and the T-72B3, making me wonder why this tank is at the end of the Euro line of main battle tanks. Maybe the firepower department will justify this. Moving on to the weapons and ammunition, and as you can see, the T-90A is armed with a 125mm 2A46M-5 cannon, the same gun as found on the T-72B3. The gun is fully stabilised, but has limited vertical guidance characteristics, with an acceptable 14 degrees of gun elevation, but an atrocious 4 degrees of gun depression. Far worse than the T-72B3's 6 degrees and the T-80U's 5 degrees. Again, why was this tank hyped so much? The tank carries 43 rounds in total and features a 22 round autoloader. If we take a look at the reloading skill under the loaders section, and due to our autoloader, we have a constant 7.1 second reload speed. This is slower than the T-80U's 6.5 second reload, and it is much slower than some NATO main battle tanks. But due to having an autoloader, you don't need high cruise skills, making this tank friendly for low skilled crews. Moving on to the targeting skill under the gunner section, and you can see that you have a base turret rotation speed of 17 degrees per second, which rises to 24 degrees per second with an ace crew. This is slower than the Western tanks, and is very noticeable in battle, and it is personally one of the biggest issues I have with Soviet tanks, as you are unable to swing the gun around quickly. Next we move to the modifications, and I want to point out that this tank gets access to both a laser rangefinder and a laser warning receiver, as well as 3rd generation thermal imaging for the gunner's sight. You also get a nice wide field of view in the gunner's sight, as well as a base 2.7x zoom and an optional 12x zoom. Moving on to the ammunition, and we have 5 rounds available, 2 stock and 3 unlockable. Your first round is the free BK-18M Heater Fast round. It travels at a muzzle velocity of 905 meters per second and can penetrate 550mm of armour at all ranges. This isn't bad for a stock shell, but when everyone at top tier is rocking composite armour, it is rather underwhelming. The second stock shell is the old meme round but with a twist. This is the old 3OF26 high explosive shell, fitted with a timed fuse. You set this fuse by using your laser rangefinder. While initially this sounds good, if you set the fuse to a moving target such as a helicopter, by the time the round is fired, the helicopter will typically have gotten closer, and the round will pass right by it, doing no damage. This shell is not like the American M830A1 multi-purpose round. It is not proximity fused. In my opinion, this round is pretty much useless against anything other than a hovering helicopter. Your third round, and first unlockable shell, is the 3BM22 APFSDS round. It has a pretty high muzzle velocity of 1760 meters per second and can penetrate 425mm of flat armour and 193mm of armour angled at 60 degrees. This is a pretty common round on top tier Soviet main battle tanks and is still usable at top tier. You then get access to the 9M119M1 tandem warhead missile. It travels at 350 meters per second and can penetrate 850mm of armour, and due to its tandem warhead, it completely ignores enemy explosive reactive armour. And finally, your last unlockable round is the 3BM42M shell. Like the DM53, this round is new to War Thunder, and is now the highest penetrating round the Soviets have access to. It can penetrate 526mm of flat armour, and against armour angled at 60 degrees, it still manages a very respectable 304mm of penetration. Its muzzle velocity of 1700 meters per second is also very high, making this shell very easy to aim at long distances. The T-90A also features a coaxially mounted rifle caliber machine gun, as well as a pintle mounted 12.7mm machine gun fired by the commander. You also have 12 smoke grenades, which fire 4 at a time, giving you 3 smoke screens. Overall, the firepower of this tank is by no means bad once you get your gun on target, nor is the target acquisition bad. You have great thermals, as well as a nice wide field of view. You are just slightly let down by your gun depression. While this is seemingly a relatively small statistic, it seriously limits your playstyle. You are unable to go hull down on most rural maps due to the rain mainly being rolling hills, which you just don't have the gun depression to use tactically. If you wanted to use a hill, you would have to push far out, take a shot, and then retreat. If you aren't immediately blasted by the nearest Leopard 2A6, you will then have to take several hours to reverse back into cover with your god-awful 4 km/h reverse speed. To conclude, I can't really recommend people grind this tank. Its only real selling point is its Storer passive protection system and its improved APFSDS round. And to be honest, the only heavily armoured tanks are in the Soviet tech tree. All of the NATO tanks have huge frontal weak spots where the older 3BM42 on the T-72 and T-80U can still easily penetrate. Apart from the 3BM42M round, both the T-72B3 and the T-80U have better mobility, better gun handling, the same, if not better armour protection, and the T-80U even fires faster. While the T-90 is by no means bad, I don't consider it coming even close to the T-80U. As stated, it is speed that wins battle in War Thunder, and the T-80U outclasses it substantially. If you are interested in the Soviet tech tree, I'd recommend grinding the T-80s first, then the T-72s, then the Tunguska or your choice of light tank, and then coming back to grind the T-90A. The tank doesn't offer anything new that can be practically used in game. I mentioned that while the T-90 has passive protection systems, no one really uses those missiles up top tier. Even most NATO helicopters use laser guidance instead of sat close. In my opinion, the T-90A should have been placed before the T-72B3. It does nothing better than the B3, and in many ways is actually less effective on the battlefield. It's important to remember, this is just my opinion. What do you guys think of this tank? If you have any questions, criticism, positive or negative, or would even like to request a review, then please feel free to leave a comment below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If I did my job correctly, hopefully you should have learned something new about this tank. If you do enjoy these sorts of videos, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. But most importantly lads, I hope you have a great day and thank you very much for watching.